Evening and welcome everyone. My name is Carrie Springer. I'm an assistant curator at the Whitney and the curator of the Whitney's presentation of Working Together, the photographers of the Kamoinge Workshop. I'm speaking to you today from Manhattan, the ancestral homeland, Lenapehoking of the Lenape. The name Manhattan comes from the word Mannahatta, meaning island of many hills. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge the original inhabitants, as well as the continued presence and vitality of Indigenous peoples in New York City. I'd also like to mention that closed captioning is available for this program. If you would like to enable the captions, please do so at the bottom of your screen. I'm very happy to introduce tonight's program, the third in a series of 4 virtual programs that are exploring the art produced by the photographers who joined the Kamoinge Workshop in the formative years and have consistently remained central to the group and its dialogue. As many of you may know, the workshop was formed in 1963 in New York City, and the early members initially came together in a spirit of friendship and support. The artists had different backgrounds and experience with photography, but they shared a common purpose: to pursue photography as an art form and to make photographs of and for the Black community as they saw and experienced them, in contrast with how they were often portrayed in art, media, and popular culture at that time. Komoenge artist Louis Draper explained their perspective when he said, "We speak of our lives as only we can." The Whitney's public programs associated with the presentation of the Working Together exhibition are bringing together members of the workshop with scholars, critics, and other artists to discuss their individual work as photographers, as well as the history and legacy of their collective efforts. Tonight's talk will explore the artist's interdisciplinary artistic influences and interests, from music and film to painting and publishing. There will be one more program in the series after tonight's, and you can find a description of that and a link to register for it on the Whitney's website at whitney.org in the events section. This series has been organized as a collaboration with the artists and in partnership with Aperture, a not-for-profit foundation that was founded in 1952 to provide a common ground for the advancement of photography. We're pleased to partner with Aperture on this series of panels on the occasion of the Working Together exhibition, as well as Aperture's release of the monograph on Kamoinge artist Ming Smith that was co-published with Documentary Arts. I now want to extend a special thanks tonight to Brendan Emser and Emily Stewart at Aperture. I also want to acknowledge Dr. Sarah Eckhart for her insightful work in organizing the Working Together exhibition for the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. Sarah has been a wonderful partner in our presentation at the Whitney. I also want to acknowledge and thank my Whitney colleague, Mia Mathias, curatorial assistant, who worked closely with me on the installation here in New York. And a very special thanks to Megan Hoyer, Director of Public Programs and Public Engagement, as well as Andrew Hawks, Coordinator of Public Programs and Public Engagement, for organizing tonight's event. For tonight's panel, Photography and Beyond in the Kamoinge Workshop, we're thrilled to have 3 amazing artists with us: Adger Cowans, Herb Robinson, and Beuford Smith. Adger Cowans is a photographer, painter, and filmmaker. He was a founding member of the Kamoinge Workshop, as well as a member of the Group 35 and Afro-Cobra collectives. Cowans was one of the first African-American students to earn a degree in photography from Ohio University in 1958. After college, he worked with Gordon Parks at Life magazine before serving in the US Navy. After his service in the Navy, he continued his education at the School of Motion Picture Arts and School of the Visual Arts in New York City. In addition to his work in photography and painting, he has a storied career in cinema as a film still photographer on over 30 Hollywood sets and worked with directors like Francis Ford Coppola, Sidney Lumet, and Spike Lee. Herb Robinson has been documenting the human experience as a photographer for over 50 years. Born in Jamaica, West Indies, his family immigrated to New York City when he was 5 years old. Robinson was one of the original members of the Kamoinge Workshop and is a designer of Timeless Photographs by Komoenge, a book published by Schiffer Publishing in 2015, which he co-edited with Anthony Barboza. The book was recognized by the New York Times as one of the best photography books of the year. He also co-curated the related Timeless exhibition at Kenkeleba Gallery in 2016. Robinson's work was part of the major Tate Modern exhibition, Soul of a Nation, Art in the Age of Black Power, which first opened in London in 2017 and later traveled to major museums in the United States. He is currently working on a new book, Metro, New York, London, Paris, which is edited and designed by Yves Sandler to be released by Schiffer Publishing in 2022. And Beuford Smith moved to New York City in the early 1960s and joined the Kamoinge Workshop in 1965 at the invitation of Roy DeCarava. In the early 1970s, in response to the exclusion of Black photographers from widely read magazines such as Popular Photography, Modern Photography, and others, Smith founded the Black Photographers Annual, a publication focused entirely on the work of Black photographers. Many of the photo editors for this publication were also members of the Kamoinge Workshop. The 4 issues published include work by a total of 118 different photographers, many of whom were Komoenge members, and they represent a wide range of personal and aesthetic perspectives. Smith is President Emeritus of Kamoinge Inc. and continues to make photographs. The artists are joined tonight in conversation with our moderator, Dr. LeRonn P. Brooks. Brooks is the Associate Curator of Modern and Contemporary Collections at the Getty Research Institute in Los Angeles. As the lead curator for the Getty's new African American Art History Initiative, he is charged with building and developing collections to promote advanced research in the study of African American art history. Dr. Brooks is a specialist in African American art, poetics, performance, and Africana studies. His interviews, essays on African American art, and poetry have appeared in publications for the Studio Museum in Harlem, Socrates Sculpture Park, the Spelman Museum of Art, Callaloo Journal, the International Review of African American Art, and Aperture, among others. I'll turn the program over to our panelists, but before I do that, I'd like to ask all of you to please put any questions that you have for the panelists in the Q&A section of your screen. At the end of the conversation, I'll come back and share with the artist as many of those questions as we have time for. Now I'd like to welcome LeRonn P. Brooks and the artists Adger Cowans, Herb Robinson, and Beuford Smith.
Thank you, Carrie, and thank you everyone joining us today. You know, I'd like to add a few comments to what you said, Carrie, in saying that Komoenge wasn't just an organization, you know, strictly speaking. It was an informal network, a circle of trust, affirmation, career development, and experimentation. During an era in which Black artists were routinely excluded from the mainstream art world, Komoenge, from one generation to the next, exemplified the principle that Black artists were experimenting in ways that defy monolithic and simplistic narratives. And to that point, Romy Crawford, in her excellent essay in the exhibition's catalog, states that their intake and embrace of other artistic media and varied art traditions offers an informative example of openness and expressiveness in terms of their interest in other art forms, other histories, other cultures, genders, and the condition of a Black collective practice. I'm looking forward to a discussion of the individual practices today. And yeah, and with that, let's begin. Adger,
Yes.
would you want to begin your presentation?
Okay. What can I say? I'm not good at talking. I'm better at taking pictures. One of the things when I was in school and they wanted to do journalism photography, I really rebelled against it because I felt that the photograph was enough. You didn't have to have words. Anyway, this picture, the Egg New, was a picture I shot in 1958 when I was in the Navy. It's a picture of my wife, and she complained about taking naked pictures of her, but when she saw the picture, it was in the Metropolitan Museum exhibition on photography. She stood by the picture because people were complimenting. She said off to the side, "Oh, you know, that's a picture of me," which I thought was very interesting because the word and the image, I don't know. I'm for the image and not the word. I think the word is a separate thing. Anyway, this figure is a shout out actually to Edward Weston, who really dealt with simplistic form, normal, natural forms and made them, you know, unforgettable. That's the only word that comes to mind. This painting on the right is a painting that I did in the 60s. After I went to Brazil, I had an epiphany and I started painting, but I hadn't been trained as a painter. So I started painting using a comb. I wanted to make paint the more important, the subject, as opposed to painting a leaf or flower or a tree. So this is acrylic on acrylic. Next. I had just gotten out of the Navy and my wife and I moved to Harlem. I had a Leica M2 that my aunt bought for me my last year in college because she was an amateur photographer, as my mother and my uncle were. So I had photography around me all the time. And my wife was teaching school and I was sitting in the window with nothing to do, no money, nothing. But I took pictures out the window every day. And that year particularly, it snowed like mad. And I saw this guy coming and I waited until he got right in that spot. There are several other pictures before and after, but they don't make it. But this one hit it right on the button for me. And I call this Footsteps as opposed to Black Man in White World. That's more political, but this is called Footsteps. The picture on the right is another painting later on in the 70s, and this is acrylic on canvas. This is a large piece. It's about 55 by 56 inches. And this is a comb piece. And I began to make my own instruments, you know, to get different forms of the combing. A lot of artists would come by my studio and check on what I was doing. But I think that this painting had to do with the golden future. I felt that in the future that our work would be, you know, important for other people to see and to understand that we were making substantive work at that time. So this is a really complicated piece in terms of how I had to arrive at these forms. The picture on the left is I went to, a friend of mine had been to Suriname and she called me and she said, Adger, I've been to this place. And I think that you would really, really love to photograph these people. You know, there's no modern conveniences there, and nobody's been up there to photograph these people. So this is Janina Galuso Ferenzi. Anyway, we went there on a grant that her cousin gave us, and we went up into the bush, as it's called. They don't say jungle, it's called the bush. And this is in Suriname. And we traveled 2 days by boat up the Tappanahoney River to a place called Gritabachi. And I met the Juka people, and I wanted to hang with them because they were the frontline warriors for the whole Bush Negro so-called nation. And they had fought with the Dutch to get their independence. And when I got there, they had won their independence. So this is one in a series of 20 photographs. We were supposed to do a book, but I didn't want to do the book because I knew that people would go up and that everything would change. And it did later on. But I wanted to just leave these people in their life, just leave them alone. So this Juka woman is, you can relate it to the painting in terms of form and shape, but they are really not related. Next. Herbie?
Oh, sorry. You were on a roll. I didn't even realize I was up. Yeah, this, in fact, ironically enough, I'm a lot like, it's not ironic, a lot like Adger, where I believe the voice should be my image. That's the voice and not my words. But in any event, this started this is 1961, part of my Central Park series. And it's during my beginning stages with my camera, with my Nikon F, where I started with, and I used to roam Central Park, come down to Central Park. I lived on West 160th Street in Washington Heights. And I would quite frequently go down to Central Park and just record basically the simplicity of life and its people. And this was one of my first. And I just always loved this particular photograph. And it just takes me back. And this photograph is really never have been in any exhibition. It hasn't been exhibited. It's basically a photograph that was in a closet. But I give so much thanks to Sarah Eckhart, because she wanted to include this particular photograph. But in any event, this is the start of my my Central Park series. Okay, my influences. Okay, my influences: painters, music or musicians, film. Here we're dealing obviously with the painter, American painter, Grant Wood. This iconic painting that everyone has seen from in every area in life, including in advertising. It's the iconic American Gothic. So for me, it was, I didn't go looking for an American Gothic, but in my travels, I found the American Gothic. And it's a study for me, because it's really a study of intensity, stillness, and just the gaze, and an ultimate portrait in terms of the collaborativeness, a couple, okay, the duo. And what I felt that I brought to this There's the New York Gothic, and also when my wife and I went to Amsterdam, hence an Amsterdam Gothic, because we were sitting in the cafe waiting for our lunch to arrive, and this caught my eye out of the window, this couple, and, American Gothic, Amsterdam Gothic. Again, painters. D. Chirico, the father of surrealists, the early 20th century, the true master of surrealism. Not only that, he inspired and influenced Max Ernst and Salvador Dali. Salvador Dali, of course, the huge marquee name and the personality and the persona. He was the Miles Davis equivalent of painters and innovators. Immediately, the color, the top two, of course, again, another series. I have a museum series, museums I photograph throughout, in this country, in America, and also throughout Europe. Each museum I went into, I came back with photographs representing that collection or collections from. Here, the Met Brewer, ironically enough, the old Whitney building, color just basically availed itself to coordinate with D. Chirico's his 1913 one of his paintings here. Now, D. Chirico for me is so special because not only in terms of the surrealism, but what the ingredients went into D. Chirico's work in terms of shadow, in terms of perspective. In this case, we're dealing with color, but you're also looking at a movie set. I mean, you're looking at poetry. You're looking at not my image, but the master, and the bottom to my Paris Noir tub. Again, we're dealing with shadows, we're dealing with lines, and we're dealing with the unconscious and the conscious, the dream. There's so much in play and so much about the Chirico, where you can extend, his arm is so long, when you can go extend it into Dali and the dream sequence in Hitchcock's Spellbound. Hitchcock hired Dali purposely for that dream sequence, because dream sequence on film has always been very ethereal and extremely elusive. Okay, what Dali brought to, and this is why Hitchcock hired him, the very sharp edges, the shadows, pretty much the definitive, the concrete, essence of a dream, literally, you know. And here again, it traces back to the Curico. Also, the shadows are extremely important, and that's why, and also the surrealism, in my case, is, again, in this time, other than Amsterdam, I'm in Paris. My wife happened to be in a dress shop, and I'm outside with my camera, and my dream sequence, my surreal, the bathtub was the first thing that spoke to me, and then a figure with a backpack walking on the left of me. It all came together, but again, it goes back to the surrealist. You know, I'll leave it there. Now,
Great. You're good, Herb?
I'm good. I'm David Lean. Okay. It's going to be very difficult for me to make this concise, but David Lean, when I saw Lawrence of Arabia, it just blew my mind. Okay, because of the expansion and the openness and the infinity of it all, and just about every frame of Lawrence of Arabia, I have etched in my brain, my mind's eye, and the rhythm of it, the music, the just it's pure cinema, and it's in so many ways. Okay, it's the extravaganza of all extravaganza, and it touched upon every area in terms of the screenplay, the book, okay, T.E. Lawrence, the story, the soundtrack, the music, of course, the cinematography, and the director, David Lean. If I were to name my favorite director, it would be David Lean. When I look at what we're just dealing with, of course, this particular still, but there are other stills that I could have put in here, including Omar Sharif's entrance on the camel. But this just opened me up so much, and musically, Gil Evans comes as an equal here, where in Gil Evans' composition of La Nevada, Snowfall, about 2 minutes into the piece that Gil wrote, the horns come in, and it just opens up, and that vista is just, it's magical. And that's what I tried to capture in Ocean Dreams.
Go ahead, Buford.
Buford.
Those are two hard acts to follow. This was taken a day after Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in 1968. And I lived on the Lower East Side. Well, it was called also, what does that say? Oh, also called the East Village. So I was very upset, of course, by Martin Luther King Jr. being assassinated. So I wanted to photograph the event of people reacting to it. So I walked from 508 East 11th Street off Avenue A, which I still remember the address, all the way up to 125th Street and Lenox Avenue. And on the way, I was taking photographs of, different people in different situations. And I came across this man in front of, not necessarily in front of Mr. Michelle's bookstore, but on Lenox and 125th Street. And there's other images besides that one. And he was crying, and the people were trying to pull him back, and the cops were approaching him. But what he was crying about was that out of the frame, but he's in another picture, there was a white gentleman that the bunch of people were beating him up, plummeting him. And he was crying to stop, don't do that, because Martin Luther King would not want you to do that, because he was a pacifist. And the crowd eventually got the white gentleman into the back of a pickup truck, and he drove off. So that's where that image came from. But most people see it as a Black protest, that he was, well, it's a protest in a sense, but a peaceful protest. Obviously not, it wasn't an anti-white protest. And these are the first 3 annuals of the Black Photographers Annual. And the annuals really came out of the genesis of me trying to do a book on Komoenge. And I gathered several photographs, and I think, in fact, it's going to be in the next presentation that I have concerning the Black Photographers Annual. During this time, I was an offset printer. So I knew about how to take and copy photographs with the offset camera. And I eventually became, I shouldn't use the term eventually, but I became the one who oversaw the publication of the Black Photographers Annual as far as the printing quality. And when I was, Rappaport printer was the ones who printed all our annuals. And when I would go down to the Rappaport printing company, I think they were on Hudson Street somewhere. As soon as I would walk in, Mr. Rappaport would say, Sid Rappaport would say, here comes the Mr. Densitometer. Because in printing, offset printing, you use a densitometer to look at the dots and so forth and so on. But I didn't need to look at dots. I could do it with my natural eye. So that's why Rappaport was calling me Mr. Densitometer. Is there any more information you would like concerning these 3 annuals?
No, you can. No, this is great. You want to stop here, Buford, or you? Or
Yeah, we'll stop it. I don't know what kind of time I have. We can go on.
Okay.
Well, that's the 4th volume. I just saw the side of it there. Well, all 3 of the first annuals were done by designed by Vernon Grant, and the last volume 4, was done by Ed Towles.
Thank you.
Oh, and
Thank
the
you.
last, I'm sorry.
Oh,
the last annual, we included a woman on the editor board as we were picking the photographs. And God, it's terrible. I can't remember her name now. I'm getting a little nervous. But we included a woman in the last volume. So I told Joe Crawford, who was the publisher, that we needed a woman to be part of the selections committee, because I knew that was going to be the last volume. And I didn't want us to go out without including any women on the selection committee staff.
Thank you. Thank you, Adger. Thank you, Buford. Thank you, Herb. And so, one way to sort of begin, just thinking about what you shared with us today. Adger, your images, the images that you showed show like a deep intimacy, right? So whether it's a photography or painting, there's an intimacy there. And I don't know how you look out a window and get a guy on the street and still have intimacy. I mean, how are you up in the apartment looking down on the street and you still have a sense of closeness, right? A sense of intimacy with that particular figure. I think that's amazing. Herb, I mean, the kind of scale you think on is really, really fascinating to me. Thinking about Lawrence of Arabia, then thinking about surrealist painting, right? And then thinking about, because each example you showed has an idea about space, right? When this is surrealist paintings, it's more enclosed. And so how you transfer that into the world is like really interesting, because it's through your eye and intuition by which you can sort of gauge these things and to still be thinking about art history and to sort of relate the history of painting into the history of the photograph as a conceit, right? As a construction or as a constructive mode to which to sort of build upon, right? The eye is just amazing, right? So Lawrence of Arabia, when I remember that film, the scale of it, right? The cinematography, the vastness of it, and sort of think about that, right? In relationship to space and the photograph, it's just really, really, really interesting, right? Let me get the Buford, right? So Buford, the way in which you deal, for me, the way in which you understand people, right, in relationship to the scene that they're in, right? And then on top of that, the ways in which you print, the ways in which you can actually manipulate the photograph to sort of make them part of an emotional moment, right? And so, you know, each of you has a wide array of talent, and so I'm thinking, how in the world did Lou Draper deal with y'all? You know, going all the way back to the beginning, right? Let's go all the way back to the beginning because I'm talking about genius here. I'm talking about brilliance. I'm talking about a group of people, Komoenge, a group of photographers who got together, and you each are extremely talented, right? You each have a particular way of seeing the world, but then you didn't necessarily step on each other's feet, right? And so going back to the beginning, just to give the viewers a sort of insight, because they may not know, right? So going back to the beginning, what did Komoenge mean to you just in terms of the development of your individual talents? You want to start with this, Adger?
Well, I had gotten out of school in 1958, and Ray called me because I had a picture of Louis Armstrong on the cover of Theater magazine. And he said, "You're a professional photographer." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, there's a group of guys up here," he said, "and we get together on Sunday and look at photographs and talk about it." He said, "I'd like you to come up and show your work and talk to us." And I did. And out of that, you know, we kept doing it. And they said, "Well, we need a name." And so Camera 35 was going to be the name. But then when Louis came in and some other people came in, we discussed, well, what is it that we actually want to do? You know, if we're going to get together and learn photography and take beautiful pictures, what is it that we want to do? You know, and so it was kicked around, and we said, well, it's interesting that we are not included in the larger world of photography. Why don't we just do beautiful photographs of our people? And that's kind of where it started. And then from there, it grew, and a lot of people came. Some people left. The people that stayed there became, you know, the Komoenge group. And I think Al found the name in a book that he was reading about Jomo Kenyatta. And so we decided we would have that name. Well, me being me, I said, "Oh man, that's ridiculous. We can't even pronounce it. Nobody can pronounce it." In the beginning, I said, "This is going to be a hard name for people to pronounce." So anyway, they voted, and I got voted out. So we went along with the name Komoenge, which means a group working together. And so we bonded around that, and everybody was different. They were all levels. Some people didn't even really know about photography or how to even read a light meter. So we all got together and exchanged information and helped each other. And then it became like a family. And then from that, it developed and it got bigger and got bigger and bigger. And we're still together. And we're changing now to really get a house and a place where we can be, where our works can be, so that this ball keeps rolling on into the future, because we feel it's very important. There's no other group like this in the USA. So that's how it started. That was the beginning. Louis and I were actually the only two people that had any professional training, you know. So we became the, you know, Louis was very kind with everybody, but I was hard, you know. I don't want to look at that. Take it out of my face. It's not a photograph. I was very critical of everybody's work because I knew I was a photographer. You know, I didn't join Komoenge to be a photographer. I was a photographer, and I imparted a lot of information to everybody to help people along. And so we stuck together, and we rolled along.
Herb and Buford.
Did you say Herb or
Herb, both of
yes.
both
Yeah.
for the sake of either one, whoever wants to jump in.
Okay. Well, Adger used the word family, and Adger,
I picked up on that too, Herb. I picked up on that too.
In fact, every single original member, I would even say posthumously. I say that because Al Finnar, Ray Francis, Herman Howard, Lou Draper, Calvin Wilson, they're upstairs, and they are also using the word family. It was synonymous with Komoenge. And Al Finnar was reading, what is it? Facing Mount Kenya. Facing Mount, was it? Mount Kenya. Yeah, Facing Mount Kenya. Yeah, by Jomo Kenyatta, correct. I'll start with Al. In fact, Tony Barboza said it best. We all influenced each other. We all. Now, and my phrase is, we are the Miles Davis Quintet. We are the Miles Davis Quintet because we have John Coltrane in the quintet. We have Cannonball Adderley in the quintet. We have Paul Chambers in the quintet. We have Philly Joe Jones, Philly Joe in the quintet, and of course, Miles Davis in the quintet. That's the Miles Davis Quintet. That's Komoenge. Now, when you have that excellence in every single member, it's not A, it's A plus, 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 plus in every single member. That's Komoenge.
Buford?
Yes, I became a member of Komoenge in 1965 when I met Roy DeCarava, and I met him at the last concert of Paul Robeson at Carnegie Hall. And a friend of mine who was the security guard of Paul Robeson, I asked his name was Roscoe Smith, no relationship. And I asked him if he knew Roy DeCarava, and he said no. So I said, okay, I'll find out who he is. I'll just look for, is that the last call for alcohol sign, Bell? No.
No.
So I would look for a person who looked like a professional photographer, and I saw Roy DeCarava with 2 cameras and a flash. So I walked to him and I said, are you Roy DeCarava? He said, yes. And I was so nervous that my flash went off in his face, and he went. So he asked me if I was a photographer, and I said yes, which I really wasn't. I had business cards because I worked as a printer. And I showed him my card. He said, well, I would like to see some of your photographs, and stop by my studio, which was on 1605 Avenue of the Americas, also called 6th Avenue. And over the years, I've acquired Roy DeCarava's loft. But anyway, I went down to Roy's studio, and he looked at my photographs. He said, okay, these are very nice photographs, but I would like for you to meet the members of the Komoenge, and they meet on Sundays, et cetera, et cetera. So I went up one Sunday, and the person who was in front of me was Lou Draper. He had a large portfolio, and he had a Chesterfield coat, and he was, walking. I'd say, okay, this guy is probably going to Komoenge, because we were in Harlem then. So I followed him, and he did go into a downstairs place, Brownstone, and it was the gallery of Komoenge. It was an office. So I showed my photographs, and they looked at them. And in fact, I remember Ernie Dunkley. He looked at my photograph and said, Buford, this doesn't tell me about anything. He kind of threw them across the table. That was a little hurt, but these guys were the first photographers I really met outside of Kwame Brathwaite. He was the first photographer I met in New York, was Kwame Brathwaite. Then I met others. But Komoenge were the first group of photographers that I met, because I was out there by myself just taking pictures. And I'm a self-taught photographer. So I felt bad, but I said, okay, I'm gonna come back. So about a month later, 2 months later, I came back. And they looked at my photographs, and so I was accepted into Komoenge. And during that time, Roy D. Robert resigned from Komoenge. And I said, well, what do I do? Do I go with Roy or do I stay? So I eventually stayed, and the rest is history in a sense that I became the president of emeritus of Komoenge. But the guys in the group, as I mentioned, I'm a self-taught photographer, but they're the ones who influenced me in the sense of my craft. I already knew how to process film, et cetera, and I found out the majority of the photographers in the group, they printed dark. And so that was a connection with them. But the one who had the influence on me as far as the images was Al Fanar. I admired everybody else in the group, but Al Fanar was the one who I looked at his work differently from the other guys. In fact, Al and I used to go to the cinema together. There used to be a cinema on St. Mark's Place. I don't remember the name of it. And Al and I would hang out at Slugs. In fact, he introduced me to the music of Harold Lloyd during this time. So Al Fanar was the one he was the only member in the group who really influenced my work as far as taking abstract. I did a couple abstract, but Al's work led me into another different direction.
Mm-hmm.
And was into jazz. In fact, during that time, Lou Draper would call me at like 3 o'clock in the morning. Well, of course, I wasn't married then. And when I picked up the phone, I would hear train or somebody blowing. I knew it was Lou Draper. So that was a fun part of that. But it was also, the critiques were merciless, but it also created craftsmanship with the group, including me. So I say, I can't show any photographs that need spotting with these guys, and that helped my craft in that sense. And also, as Herb mentioned and Adger mentioned, it was a family. It still is, because I resigned once, and Ray Francis, who was one of the founders, he said, Buford, Komoenge is like the mafia. You do not resign. You are a member forever. So I know you got that. So I have some problems with the members, but we're still a family.
Buford, when you brought up Roy D. Carava, it's really personal for me, because I remember as an undergraduate, I was a painting major at Hunter, and I'd be in the studio late night, and then he'd be printing, right, late night. And so I would just drop by and, befriended him. And it's like over a year, he critiqued my paintings.
Okay.
Right. So when you bring up interdisciplinary, that you're a photographer, I was like, okay, Roy was a photographer, but he also knew a whole lot about paintings. like
I think he started out as a painter.
Yes.
Yep.
Can I add one thing to that? The segue. Sorry, Herb, to cut in.
No.
Fantastic photograph. Roy got me the position at Cooper Union as instructor at Cooper Union, and he also got me an adjunct professorship at Hunter College. Mm-hmm. So maybe I saw you walking through the halls doing that.
Maybe, but it kind of makes sense, right? Because when you said you're an artist, right? You meant everything, right? You meant that your influences come from everywhere. And so when people think about photography, they often think photographers just look at photography, right? So it's not just you in the world, but it's actually your study of things that you actually have a genuine interest in. And so, Adger, when you showed the painting, it was acrylic, right? And I saw, the kind of rake, I thought of Jack Whitney. I thought of that kind of innovation, right? You using a tool.
He got it from me.
Now we know, okay? I guess now we know. Now, right? So we talk about like this interest. Each of you is not just painting, right? It's not just cinema, right? It's also the intellectual cultures of these disciplines, right? Because right. So you're engaging the intellectual culture of jazz, right? Bebop, what is the logic of bebop? The fragmentation, the speed, the intellectual sort of changing from one thing into the other to sort of make a cohesive whole. That's a photograph, right? You take all of these different elements and then your eye, right, just brings together to one, sort of cohesive whole. And so it kind of makes sense that your engagement wasn't superficial at all. You're actually almost reversing the process to understand it as a photographer.
Yeah.
In fact, I tell the young Turks, Turkettes, or whatever we call them now, is that don't look at just photography. Look at the whole spectrum: movies, paintings, everything. Just don't go to photographic exhibits. See the whole gamut: paintings, everything. It's all connected. In fact, I'm a frustrated painter.
Yeah. So when we talk about, what it meant to be a photographer, let's say 1960s and 70s, Deb Willis said in the catalog, the Black subject is sort of endemic with, American popular culture through popular culture through the photograph, right? So what did it mean to be a photographer in the 1960s and 70s as all this political activity is going on? But, you guys weren't into strict documentation. You also were thinking about the world, but thinking about the world through, these really interesting individual lenses, right? That didn't necessarily prioritize documentation, but you guys actually recorded what it meant to, like, the essences of an existence, right? Herb, you're in the park looking at people laying down. So you're thinking about structure. I think a lot about structure when I think about your work, Herb. You pay a lot of attention to structure, right?
Yes.
Do you want to begin like Herb? Can you?
No. But I just wanted to say this really fast to continue what you and Buford close on. All of the arts, including, we didn't touch on literary arts. Okay, in terms of literary arts, the author Isabel Wilkerson, the book Cast, there's a page, I think it's page 90, where she writes the intravenous drip on the mind. I mean, that to me was what I mentioned in terms of David Lean, how it was just, I mean, it went beyond the page, or Lean, of course, beyond the screen. But that phrase, an intravenous drip on the mind, I mean, that's beyond heavy, okay? Mm-hmm. So now we can continue. So all of the arts are extremely important. I mean, Miles said, if you trip, play that, okay? You utilize anything and everything in life, okay? And as an artist, you owe it to yourself to do that. There's a whole world out there, but anyway, I'm sorry, winging my way back. What was your question? I'm sorry.
No, I mean, I was just saying that when I think about your work, I think about your attention to structure.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Your attention, not just to detail, but how a photograph is actually made, right? And it's not, the photograph can be made like to a certain degree in the lens, but you see it in the world.
Yes.
And so, what did it mean to actually be, this is for everyone, what did it mean to actually be in a group of really strong-minded people? Really strong-minded people, but then you say family, it kind of makes sense, but can you give those who are watching a sense of what did it mean to sort of eat dinner together? What did it mean to sort of gather and listen to jazz together, right? What did it mean to sort of be in close proximity to other creatives and you're each thinking about each other? What can you give the viewers a sense of that?
It was utopia. Go ahead. Go ahead. Buford?
No.
No.
We did a lot of arguing. We did a lot of your point of view is not this, your point of view is not that. But we argued and fought. I mean, we argued, critiques on photographs was tough. you know?
Mhm.
Some people would leave crying in tears because somebody said something bad about their work. But still, again, like Buford, he came back. And those are the people that really made the group. Photography was more important than your personal angst with somebody or your personal point of view. It was more important that we stayed together as a group, argued and fight, but we stayed together.
Mhm.
That was important.
Yes, but Komoenge was like the blues. Happy, happy, happy blues, as well as, you know, the it's not all about, you know, my woman has done me wrong, or my, you know, I didn't have this. And no, it's happy blues. And that's what I meant when I said utopia. The blues. I mean, that's,
Yeah, we had the whole ball.
thank you.
Mhm. Mhm. So when when did you first consider yourself to be, are you at a place where you can say that you are making images that you think would resonate with a certain kind of power and a certain kind of legacy? Because each of you brings a legacy. You know, each of you is a legacy. I mean, at this point in your career, how do you think photographers should actually be practicing today, considering the sort of groundwork that you laid down? I mean, should they follow the road of rugged individualism? Should they form collectives, right? Especially in this particular moment. You know, how do you think? Well, I would say young artists. How do you think young artists should actually consider the work that you did, and to sort of the sort of legacy of Black photographers, and how can they move forward with that? What are the things you want them to take with them?
Are you addressing that to me?
Everyone.
Since
Go for it,
Adger
Buford.
were
Go
quiet
for it,
for a split second, I said, let me jump in on this one. Well, I think that the photographers who are out there now in the past, just 10 years or whatever, they are more academics than us photographers who were self-taught. There was Adger and someone else in the group where, you know, went to college as far as photography goes. And also Herb Randall, he studied with Harold Feinstein, and Lou Draper studied with Eugene Smith. So they did have some background with that. But kind of getting back is that photographers today, they are more, from what I've observed and noticed, the ones who come to see me or whatever, it's open for them now than it was when we were coming along. There's more grants and there's more fellowship going on, but I don't know about a cohesive unit like Komoenge was, because I talked to a lot of photographers and they don't have a unit going like Komoenge. And a lot of the photographers who are coming up or successful, they still want to become members of Komoenge. And I think the reason why they want to become members of Komoenge is that it's a Black family. Because a lot of photographers, they're into different things, but hey, I got to go back home. And home to a lot of them is Komoenge. I hope that did answer. I know I was all over the place.
No, you were right on time. You're right. You were right in the pocket. Yeah.
Well, what I say, my point of view on all this is, do your own thing. Do you. And the only way that you can do you, I think, is to deal with your inner development as a person, as an artist, your angst, your whatever. Deal with your own stuff. Don't copy. You can learn from other artists, you know, about composition, about this, about that, but you have to do the work, and the work is hard. This is not an easy thing to do. This is your life's work. This is not fun. This is not, you know, a vocation for just hanging out with. If you are really serious about being any kind of artist, I don't care what it is, photography, painting, dancing, whatever, you have to get to the essence of what you are. Get out of the way of yourself and listen to that inner voice that's telling you and instructing you to do whatever you are doing. Leave all that other stuff. Wanting to be famous and all this bullshit that will hold you and stop you from achieving the knowledge and the awareness and all of that that has to do with being an artist, being a creative person. I'm not a political person. My photographs are about the world. They're about everything and everybody. You know, I don't restrict myself to any one area. I go where spirit moves me to go. And that's what you have to do. You have to listen to that inner spirit that's guiding you. Be quiet. Get off of your cell phone. Get off of all these things that are taking time and energy away from you understanding how to move forward with whatever it is that you're creating, because it's there. And when you listen to that inner voice, and follow it, it'll happen. It doesn't happen overnight. You think of the photographers of the past and how they hone their craft. You got to know what you're doing. You can't just pick up a cell phone and take a bunch of pictures. A lot of people do. They make money, and that's great, but that's not being what I consider an artist. If you are making pictures that last down through time, then and only then can you call yourself an artist. You're changing things from your point of view. That's a mouthful.
well I just took the horn out of your mouth. Now, in fact, that was a Prez or a Coltrane solo. I just want to add to what you, Adger, just said and what Buford just said. I agree 100% with what both of you guys said. I just want to add that you have to go back to go forward. And going back for this generation of artists, and in this discipline, photographers, they in general, and I'm generalizing, they don't have the need or the desire to go back, okay? To really amass what we have in terms of the craft and also what it's all about, and to grow. And there's no, Buford and I had this conversation, there's no excuse for this generation because there is an equalizer, okay? This generation feels that, well, why should we, that's old school, why should we do this? Why do we want to know about Paul Strand or whoever? Why should we, Edward Weston you mentioned, why should it's irrelevant. We don't need, this is the digital age. Okay, now there was no such thing as YouTube or the iPhone when we were learning about Paul Strand and Kurosawa, and there was no YouTube. Okay, now we have YouTube, which means that the digital generation can still, quickly in milliseconds amass the same information. They don't have to go to a bookstore, now. So there's no excuse for it. They can go back to help them go forward. It's no longer a priority or the desire to do that. And this is what I'm adding to what you guys just got through laying down. That's my beef, or that's what I find where the hole is right now. And it's because they don't really know the history and even our history.
Buford, did you want to add to that?
What can I possibly add to that? That's just like adding something after Bird or whoever is out there. I can't add a coda to that. Are you kidding me?
I hear you. I hear you.
But I will bring up something. This reminds me of when Charlie Parker was playing at the. See, I'm dating myself here. Going back to jazz at the Philharmonics, Bird was playing, and everybody's present. A whole lot of other people were on stage, and they want to know who would follow Bird. And everybody looked at each other. So somebody pushed Lester Young out there. So that was it. So that's why I would reply that I don't want to follow her with that, what he said. You kidding me?
Mm-hmm.
You can't. At least I can't.
And you know, Buford,
saying about Coltrane
Pardon me?
and Miles. Somebody said Coltrane, he played, you know.
I'm not going to get into an argument about, not an argument, but a dissent on who, if Coltrane could follow Bird or what. I'm not going to do that now, because I don't know how much kind of time we got, and I want to talk about my photograph.
Listen, I think we're at a Komoenge meeting right now.
Yes. It always winds up this way.
But it was just a statement that Coltrane, he said, oh, Coltrane, he plays a whole lot of notes, man. He said, well, you know, you take the horn out of his mouth.
But you know what, guys? So when I think about Coltrane, and you mentioned Lester Young, right? When I think about both, I think about how both brought different feelings, you know, to the stage. You know, Lester Young can do a great slow song, a ballad, right? Yeah. Coltrane, when he got into his expansive mode, he just like expanded. But they both brought definite senses of feeling, right? And so when I think about, Komoenge, I'm thinking about, sometimes I think it's sort of a workshop about the methodology of feeling, right? Because there's only so much that you could bring to it just in terms of, your technical skill. You got to have something else there, right? It's part intuition, right?
Yes.
So when I think of you, Buford, I think of, you're so distinct just in terms of your sound, right? The sound of your image, right? Yeah. Same thing with you, Herb, same thing with you, Adger. And so, can you speak a little bit about Komoenge and just the sort of the feelings you allow to have and speak through your art and how that workshop sort of, allowed that to be encouraged?
Well, I think, first of all, even before photography, we cared about each other.
Yes.
We cared about each other.
Yes.
That was the first thing.
Mm-hmm.
Cared about each other as a human being, as a person. We cared about each other. And then we cared about photography. But first, we cared about each other. To find another brother who was taking pictures and not making a living and spending his money on film instead of food and eating sardines all week. We said, well, this guy, he's really committed. He didn't pay the rent. He went and bought some film.
Sardines, I was eating cat food. Typical, I should say.
Committed to the image. The image is the most important thing. And we all rallied around that with love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think people don't talk about that enough because, when they think about artists, in terms of your stature, or each one of you, when people from the outside think about you, they think, maybe it's all good for, that you guys had an easy street, that when you bring up the sardines or the cat food or, whatever you were eating to buy supplies, right? Because you needed to buy supplies and you needed to just practice your craft. People don't think about the ungracious years,
right?
And this kinds of persistence. And I can't help but just to think about how a group like Komoenge really, allowed you to have a home in which the friends that you've chosen, your chosen family,
yes,
right? Your chosen family supported each other, on that road through the lean years. But, but let's get into some of the work in terms of the time we have. Just looking at this, so this is on screen. Can you speak about this for the audience, Adger? And then we'll get to Buford. We'll get one of your images, and then Herb will go to one of your images. But since Adger's here on screen already, can you speak about this image, Adger, of Betty Shabazz?
Yeah, I was living on 150th Street in Convent Avenue. And I think by this time I was in the union. And I noticed these guys with the camera there to the left. And they said, "Oh, Adger, what are you doing here?" I said, "What's going on?" They said, "Oh, everybody's at the front, but I think Betty Shabazz and them are gonna come out the back."
Mm-hmm.
And I had just gone to the store. I didn't even, so I had my camera. I always carry my camera with me. And so I got behind him. I said, "Well, you need a press pass." I said, "I'm with these guys." So I was like over his shoulder. And so when Betty Shabazz, and Percy Sutton came out, Percy Sutton is back there on the right-hand side. You can't hardly see him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was able to get this photograph. I mean, it was very moving to me. I mean, I was in tears when I saw her in tears. I mean, Malcolm was our prince,
Mm-hmm.
he was gone. And this was a very moving photograph for me emotionally. I tell my students, you take pictures with your heart, not your eyes. Your eyes feel, your eyes see, but it's your heart that feels. And that's when you press the shutter. It's a feeling thing. Photography to me is all about feeling. All the arts are. It's about feeling. You have to put in there that all human beings, no matter race, color, whatever, feeling.
Right. Thank you. I mean, what gets me about the images is sort of the power of your handling of, just the grayscale here and just perspective. And so to walk into this image is just really powerful, Carrie, are we on time? Are we good?
Yes, I think we're about the point where we should probably try to start looking at some of their recent work. I think we have a few slides of that, don't we? Yes.
Yeah, this is a photograph. This is not a painting. People ask me, "What is this?" It's a photograph, not a painting.
Is that digital, Adger?
It's a shot with a digital camera, but it's not manipulated. This is what images look like.
Digital capture. Digital capture.
Yeah, it's captured with a digital camera. I could have captured it on film too, but this was the image. And I made this image with the colors and the reflections. Oh, this is something that I'm working on. For the last few years, I've been working on
it. This is pertinent. This is what I was referring to, okay? And a digital, this now technology in the hands of a master.
And Adger, you've been working with color. Actually, you all have been working with color for quite some time.
Yes.
Yeah. Here, Herb, you want to say something about
this? This we have here two images from my current project, which is, in fact, Carrie, you had mentioned in the beginning, the book by Schiffer that will be out in 2022, early 2022, and edited and designed by Yves Sandler, the brilliant artist. But these are my two color palette images, one from New York, obviously, New York. It's all about the metro system, and the other from Paris, and they're portraits on the train, basically. So,
no, it's wonderful because to think through emotion and color in photography is not easy.
No,
right? It's not easy because black and white will speak in a certain way graphically, at first, but to think through photography and color, I mean, to Adger's point is but Buford, your ability to sort of think graphically just in terms of black and white, I mean, it blows me away. I mean, you are just like, I mean, similar to Jacob Lawrence, some of your images. I mean, here we have, Malcolm X and Sandra Bland, and just your ability to pay attention to these kinds of tributes, speaks to your eye, but the way that you frame it, speaks to your consideration of space and composition. I mean, so it's really agile, but maybe, yeah.
Well, the photograph on the left, there's a little funny story. Well, to me, it's funny about this gentleman walking down 125th Street. That day, I try to get up to Harlem at least 3 or 4 times a year to photograph. That's my soul. I do other stuff and a lot of abstract, but not saying the abstract is not Black, but I try to stick to a lot of Black images. So I'm gonna say on video Zoom that I try to photograph Black as much as possible. Now, getting back to this image, I was photographing the Malcolm X Day birthday on 125th Street. I think there's an organization called the 12th or something movement. Every Malcolm X birthday, they closed down 125th Street for 4 hours. So I was aware of this. I went up there that day. So I'm photographing, and I saw this guy with the T-shirt on. And I said, "You mind if I take a photograph of you, with the T-shirt and everything?" He said, "No." And he had a cigarette. And he put the cigarette on the side. He said, "What's going on?" So I thought he was part of the demonstration. So I said, "Today is Malcolm X's birthday, and there's a demonstration going on." So I said, "Oh, I didn't know that." So that's what I considered funny. He's got this T-shirt on, and the people are marching, and he didn't know what the whole marching was about. Now, the other one with Sandra Bland, when I saw this photograph, because the motive with her persona in a certain sense is, what's her name? So I cropped the man's head off. So you would look at that photograph, and there's a heart eyes piece and everything, like, what's my name? Who is she? So that's all that was about. As far as the color, I've gotten lazy because I use a digital camera and also an analog. But with the digital camera, you can take color photographs. So a lot of that comes into play with that. And I see in color, but I prefer black and white. But color, I can go back and I can make a black and white print of this and a black and white print of that. But black and white didn't work for me with this. It was about color. But I see in color, but I prefer black and white. Because I love to be in a dark room, and I'm sorry, I love the smell of hypo. What can I tell you?
You sound like Lou Draper.
I'm probably the only. I only know about 5 photographers who still have a dark room.
Wow.
I still have a dark. I still have. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Welcome to the club.
Yeah.
Is there another Carrie?
Well, yeah, I wonder if I should start with, I think maybe I should start with some of the questions if unless you have something else, LeRonn, you want to.
Well, I just want to thank Adger, Buford, Herb. I just want to thank you guys for just taking the time to speak about your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Because it's not just me asking questions, it's also me learning that I really find just really invigorating. So just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we are all a family.
Yep.
Slide the family stone. We are a family.
So you've answered already a lot of the questions that were in the chat, but here I'll start with a couple that I don't think did get answered. And one was a question as to what percentage of your work is composed in the lens versus in the darkroom / framing to print. So
all in the camera.
Yes.
All in the camera.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that true for all of you?
Yes. Yes.
I didn't quite hear the question.
I'm sorry, Buford. It was what percentage of your work is composed in the lens versus in the darkroom or your framing of what you've got in your negative?
In other words, you're asking about the manipulation in the darkroom.
Right.
Well, I would say 99% of my work is done in the darkroom in a sense. Well, let me retract that. I pre-visualize an image. When I take a shot, I know how I'm going to print it in the darkroom. I don't do much manipulation. Sometimes I'll darken the image darker, hold back and dodge it or whatever.
Mhm.
but that depends. And in fact, I had a conversation with a friend of mine, Karen Bell, excellent photographer and a friend, one of my breakfast buddies. We were talking, she's a digital camera person. And she was talking about the digital cameras and what you could do. I said, well, you know what? I don't get into that digital stuff, manipulating with digital. She said, Buford, don't you burn in and dodge? So I said, yes. She said, what's the difference? So she was right.
Interesting.
In fact, one of my students, when I taught at Hunter College, they were saying, well, Professor Smith, I can correct this with the camera. I said, don't go photograph and think that you can correct it with the camera. Get the image in the very beginning. That's all. I hope that made sense.
Thank you. Yes, it did. Here's another question. There seems to be a strong link between many of the Komoenge photographers and cinema. And of course, there's Parks as a towering example. Was there an equally important network of Black filmmakers who supported the vision of these important artists? Are any of you aware of a network of Black filmmakers?
Well, Adger could probably speak to that
Yeah.
better than I can.
Yeah, Adger.
No, not that I know of. There is probably in the work that I do on films, there are probably about 10 or 12 photographers internationally. It's a very small amount, but we get together every now and then and talk, and they're all doing great things. But there's no network that I know of cinematographers, Black cinematographers.
Thanks, Adger. So here's one that we can end with. Let's see how you like this one. Adger has said in the past that art is the outward expression of inner development. How have you all evolved as individuals through your photographic and artistic work? Adger, you want to start with that one?
You know what? I feel horrible. Could you speak a little louder for me?
Absolutely. I'll restate it.
Thank you.
Tell me if you can't hear me.
Yes, I can hear you well.
Okay. Adger has said in the past that art is the outward expression of inner development. How have you all evolved as individuals through your photographic and artistic work?
That statement is what Edward Weston said.
I thought it was familiar.
That's Edward Weston's statement.
Right.
Thank you, Adger.
Carrie, I didn't want to say anything, but it sounded like Weston's.
We'll be accused of plagiarism.
I know.
Better not.
Well, I think inner development is very important to understand yourself, to understand what guides you. You have to work on your problems as a human being. You have to work on your prejudices as a human being. You always have to work on yourself to open up, to get away from what I call the mass mind. You have to get away from that and open yourself up inside and develop yourself as a full human being.
Yes, yes.
And then, maybe you can get the spirit in there and, something will happen. But you got to get out of the way of your own self, your own prejudices, your own whatever, and develop as a human being.
Could I add to that? I'm not taking the horn out of your mouth. Keep blowing, Adger.
No.
Okay. In terms of introspectiveness, we are at the age now that Adger, we totally understand what you just got through saying, because that's, I ditto what you just got through saying. Yes. But I believe you have to you have to have walked X amount of miles.
Yes.
In order to arrive at what you're saying. But that's all I wanted to add.
Buford, do you
Well,
have anything to add?
I could add, I don't know if this is, if it's ambiguous or not, that I do not leave the house without my camera. And I'm constantly photographing. I photograph in the house. So I'm an in-house photographer also. And I think I'm gonna have to quote Roy DeCarava. Once you look at when you see my photograph, you see me.
Oh, yeah.
And that's all I can answer with that. So I'm constantly photographing. I've even photographed this session here up to a point. So that's who I am.
I don't think I've ever seen you, Buford, without your camera.
Pardon me?
I don't think I've ever seen you without your camera.
No one has.
Oh, thank you all so much. And thank you,
Thank you.
LeRonn. You are a great moderator. I really appreciate it.
Oh, yes.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
And thanks to all the audience who joined us this evening.
It's great. It was great. Thank you all.
Thank you for coming, and I hope you'll get a chance to see the Working Together exhibition.
I would like to thank Megan and also you, and thank my wife, Evelyn, because she got me on.
Yes, thank you, Evelyn. I'm sorry.
Yes.
We appreciate you.
We all thank Evelyn.
Absolutely.
We couldn't do it without Buford.
No.
Well, thank you, Herb.
Thank you all. Good evening.
Don't forget, like
Good evening.
I said, we are a family.
Yes.
That's right.
Good evening.
Take care, everyone.